Hey guys, welcome to another week. This week we're going to be focusing on knocking a few things off of this list. I can already see one for sure, two things on here that we can cross off right now that we already did in the last video, the tire rack and the brush guard. And then this week we're going to be doing a little bit of tweaking to the van so that the tires fit properly within the wheel wells, and then also doing some last few changes to the suspension. So let's get this crossed off. We'll head outside, we'll get those things done, and then we'll come back and finish this off. Okay, tires are all installed there, but we do have a little bit of rubbing. I knew we were going to get some because on the 2019 and newer vans, these mud flaps kind of extend forward, and it's not just the plastic, unfortunately. It is this metal piece on the back here. The wheel well kind of comes down, and then also it kind of extends inwards, which is annoying. On the prior to 2019, the metal didn't extend inwards at all, and it would have been fine. So basically the answer is we're gonna have to kind of mark about almost an inch at the bottom and kind of mark it in to around kind of here, and probably just draw a line and put some tape on there, and then I'm going to end up cutting a little bit of this metal out. And then what we'll need to do is there's a clip here. We'll need to make a little bracket that'll get mounted in there, and that way we can still fasten this mud flap on here with the original clip. So, but in the end, this mud flap will sit about an inch back right here. It'll probably sit maybe more flush with this kind of trim line, and then that'll give us the necessary room to have this tire kind of do a full rotation without bumping into this. There is a little bit in the back, I think, as well, that we will just, all we have to do is push a panel back once we kind of take out this entire inner wheel well. So it doesn't seem too bad. So unfortunately we need to do it, but once it's done, the tires will work well. So we'll get going on this. Okay, now that it's off, you can kind of see the part that we're gonna have to end up cutting out. It's just a thin piece of sheet metal here. You can actually get a full fender from I think it's Agile Off-Road or whatever, I can't remember what it's called, but you can get this entire fender piece that extends all the way up here, but you still need to be doing some trimming with the with all of this and everything. So, and it's not cheap, so I've read many people online just end up doing this as well. Just literally do this cut, and I feel like you'll probably spend just as much time doing the installation, whether you go with the cut or whether you do with the whole fender repairs or replacement. So yeah, I think I got to take all this off too, and then we'll see what it looks like. So what I've seen online, aside from cutting this part right here, we just need to go and push this back a little bit, because that kind of holds the back of the fender in. We'll push that back a little bit so it has a little bit more give. But I'm going to clean this up here and then try to draw the line that I want to follow in here, and then we'll take this clip. We'll take this little clip off, because we'll reuse this, because I'm going to make a little bracket that's going to go in its spot a little bit further back, and that's going to allow us to still connect that mud flap so it stays nice and secure. So for now, I need to go ahead and figure out what's the line that I'm going to need to cut, and then probably I probably just use an angle grinder and cut it out. So we'll see how that goes. It doesn't have to be too neat, because as long as we paint all the exposed metal, and then the mud flap's going to go right back on there, so it'll be completely hidden. Okay, so this is what I'm going to basically do, is cut off about this much here, kind of use like a line on the fender there to kind of use as a starting spot, and then it's going to kind of come up here, and then once that's trimmed off there, the mud flap will be able to come back this far versus being stuck here, and that'll give us that extra little bit of wiggle room that we need. Okay, not really a science to it other than just trying to get a more or less straight line there. I'm going to clean this up, file it all down, and then we will apply some paint and stuff, and then that's all that's really going to be needed to be done on this side. We still have this clip up top that's usable, and then the one that's going to go on the inside, I'm going to put a little bracket in here, and that's going to be what we can mount the bottom hole to. So one side is done, just need to clean it up. Okay, so this is what it looks like now, and I've taken it for a little bit of a test drive. I put the wheel well kind of cover back in there for the most part. I still need to fix a few spots on it just to align it perfectly, and then I'm going to put the mud guard back on there, or the mud flap. But it seems to be working pretty well. I took it for a test drive, and this side's not rubbing at all, even when I'm coming to a quick stop and turning. I've noticed that if I'm braking and I'm turning right, that's when I still get rubbing because the other side hasn't been done yet, but this side seems to be working pretty well. Okay, so once again, I'm just going to turn the wheel to get a little bit more space here, and then what I'm going to do is pull this flap off, the mud flap here, take the one half of the wheel well plastic liner out of here, and then we will tape this side to kind of make a line of what we're going to cut, and then we'll cut that off, paint it, let that dry, and then reassemble the wheel well. Okay, once again, doesn't have to be like totally pretty because it's all going to be hidden, but it's pretty smooth straight along there. Just cut all that off, and then now what I'm going to do is file that all down, paint it, get rid of all these little excess pieces of metal here, and then yeah, paint it, and then that'll all be covered up by plastic. Okay, so that's all painted up here. You can see this little bracket back here that on the other side I really gave it a good push. One issue with that though is that these are all plastic nuts that are holding these onto the bolts that are coming out of the van, and I found that it just kind of like popped the nut right off. So this time I undid this entire plastic nut there, and then I used pliers to bend the metal, which was really easy, and then just put this back on there, and then that's probably a better way to do it. Okay, so you see what I've done here. I've done a bit of a rough job just painting this up. This is all going to be covered by the mud flap, so it doesn't matter how neat it is. I've got some aluminum 90s, or a 90 angle here that I'm going to go ahead and cut into small pieces, 2 small pieces, and that's going to create 2 brackets that I'll make a hole through, and then that will get mounted in behind this piece of sheet metal with a stainless screw there to hold fasten it in, and then that's going to allow me to go ahead and mount the mud flap right on there. And here's the mud flap. It's going to go on there, and it's going to get sucked back a little bit so that there's enough clearance between the edge of the mud flap and the tire. So shouldn't be too bad, just need to let the paint dry, and then in the meantime I'll cut the angle, the aluminum angle that I've got here. Okay, so this little bracket is going to go right inside of here. More or less in there. And then we'll have a hole, and then that way I can screw the mud flap in from the front, and it'll be mounted to the side of this piece of sheet metal here. Okay, so I've got this rough little bracket here, just got a hole for mounting it to the side of the fender there, and then I'm going to go ahead and I've got the original clip on here, and I'm going to try to run the screw that mounts into here just through there, and then that should hold the mud flap on there. So we may need to make a few adjustments, but it looks like it should work. Well, it seems to be in the right spot. It seems to be nice and strong there. So you can see the bracket in there. It's just mounted on the side. It's nice and strong. It doesn't really have to hold. There's not really much weight that it's, or strength that it needs, but basically then this is going to go right on there, and the mud flap's going to go over top. So we'll see if that fits. If so, then it looks good, and then we'll just do the other side. Okay, so that looks a lot better. There's at least 2 fingers of space in between there. Before there was really only like 1 and maybe a little bit. We might still get a little bit of rubbing on this, and maybe I'll have to make some more adjustments just because this mud flap kind of comes out a little bit. But what you can see is it used to the mud flap used to come down and you used to be able to see this kind of weld line all the way down, and now the mud flap kind of goes straight into the edge of this weld line. So I think that's as good as it's going to get for now. Anyways, we'll kind of see once we start driving, and I can always take it off and cut a little more off if I really have to. But the only other thing that we need to do is kind of figure out this, just since we kind of stretched this wheel liner, the wheel well liner a little bit, we'll have to just find a way to mount, kind of get that attached a little bit further in there. Maybe I'll put another bracket in or something like that. But other than that, it looks pretty good. Good amount of clearance back there. So we'll see what it's like once we start driving it. Now, let's just get the other side done nice and quick. Okay, it's getting pretty dark here. It was hard to see. Let's see if I can even get to show you. It's hard to see because of how dark it is, but there's a pretty good, again, kind of 2 fingers. It's not as, the mud flap doesn't seem to go back as far as the other side. It's not like you're ever going to see both sides at the same time, but if I have to, I may have to put like something underneath there to kind of pull this back even a little bit further. But at least if we have any rubbing, it's just going to be the rubber from the tire hitting the mud flap versus actually hitting metal, which should be a little bit better. But from here, it looks like there's a good amount of clearance, so we'll only really know once we hit the road. So this side was way quicker after I had done the other side and figured out how to make the bracket and all that stuff. So you can totally do it this way. It's not too hard, and if you screw up, you can just buy a new piece of that one whole fender piece is something that you can buy from Mercedes. So if you, I don't know, if it ended up rusting, or if you messed up and cut something that you didn't want to, you could always replace that. You can also go and buy the Van, I think it's Van Compass or Agile Off-Road or something like that, does make a whole kit for this, but it is a little bit costly, so it doesn't hurt to try this first, and then worst case, if it doesn't work out, you can always buy that kit. So yeah, we'll give it a try on the road, and hopefully it works. Got dirty hands, gotta go clean up. Okay, the next suspension upgrade is finally gonna get done, and we'll only have one last thing to do once we're done here. So here's the van, nice and clean, looks good. So what we're gonna do today is put on, last time we put the leaf springs on, which have been working really well. And then today what we're gonna do is go ahead and we'll retighten all those bolts that we put in last week, just to make sure everything is still tightened down nice and good. So we're gonna swap out, so these are the leaf springs we installed the other week, and then we're gonna swap out the shocks there for some new shocks that have been tuned for a heavy load, and as well as put some Sumo springs, which are going to go right where there's a bump stop here. You'll see it better once we have the tires off. And all these things combined will help with the ride quality, reduce kind of sway of the van going back and forth, give it some support. And then the only last thing that we're still waiting on is a sway bar, a new heavier duty sway bar that's going to go across. But for now, we're gonna leave that for, that'll be the last thing that we don't do. So I've got the pizza, and we'll get started. The problem is that lights, it's getting dark so much earlier now. It's 6:30 and it's already pretty dark out here. So I've got some lights with me, and hopefully we can get it done pretty quick. I don't think this is going to be as involved as the leaf spring, and especially because everything I need to take off here is pretty much stuff that I took off the last time, so I know how to do it. But yeah, hopefully it goes quick. Okay, trying to get those lug nuts untightened took an insane amount of force, more than I've ever seen on a tire before. So anyways, got them all done. Gonna take this tire off. Once the tire's off, we'll do the other one, get that one off, and then we'll start with probably the shocks, and then we'll go with the Sumo springs afterwards. Okay, so thankfully that side was way better. For whatever reason, the driver's side took an absolutely insane amount of force to try to get out of the darkness here. Insane amount of force to get off, and the passenger side was totally normal. So I don't know, maybe the torque setting was set a little too high on this side when they put them on. So okay, so now that they're off, I'll show you what the Sumo springs and what the shocks look like. Okay, so the Sumo springs are gonna go in right inside here. You can see there's a bottom portion of this bump. I can't see without the lights. A bottom portion of this bump stop right here, and it goes up to this part right up top here. And the Sumo springs are gonna sit right inside there and then give those a little bit more support. And then this is the shock that we're gonna be removing here and putting in the new one that is tuned specifically for this kind of weight on a van. So here's what the Sumo springs look like. Sumo springs, these are gonna go where those bump stops are. And then we'll open up the shocks right here and see what they look like. Okay, here are the Falcon shocks there. They look nice, they look nicer anyways, not that you'll really see them. But they're gonna go in place of those existing stock shocks there. And they'll be installed like that. And then these will just go over top and kind of cover up the metal there. So I'm going to charge this camera and then I will give you guys an update as soon as it's charged up. Okay, I didn't get to show you guys much of the shock install just because it was dark, but it was also only 2 bolts. So there's the new ones installed there. So all I did was take out the top bolt and the lower bolt. This was 21 millimeters, that was 18 millimeters. Remove the bolts on both ends, and then once that was removed, go ahead and put the existing bolt back in the top there, torque that to 100 pounds after you've put in the bottom one, and the bottom one just is torqued to 60 pounds, and then really that's all that there is to it. So those are in there. Had my dad come out just to help lift the axle there, or push the axle down there just to help slide the bolt through. But other than that, that's a pretty easy install. Just kind of awkward trying to get in here with the torque wrench in this limited space to try to tighten it, and then also when you're trying to loosen it, trying to work in this small space. So the shocks are done. So now I'm going to go ahead and just read up on the manual and see how we're going to install these Sumo springs and take out these existing bump stops. Okay, so we'll get cameraman Jim here to help out.
All ready.
There we go. Yeah, there. So there you go. Then maybe I'll give you the flashlight too.
Okay. The important jobs.
So this bump stop here, I was trying to figure out how to get it off by hammering it, but you just give it a pull here and it just twists right out of there. And then there's one that's on the axle here, which I'm gonna have to get underneath to take some bolts off to remove that. And then once that's off there, we'll be able to mount the pieces onto the top and bottom there. Okay, this doesn't happen all that often, but I think we're gonna have to call this one a day on the Sumo springs. I'll show you. So once again, took these off, the bump stops, and then down here there's the lower portion of it. On the inside of this, right on the other side where my finger is, there's 2 T50 Torx bolts that I need to remove. Unfortunately, the largest size I have is a T45, which is a little bit too small. So I'm gonna have to go buy those tomorrow. What I'm gonna do is just reattach the sway bar mount that I took off there, which I didn't really need to take off in the first place, but then go ahead, put the tires back on, and then I think I can do all of this job without removing the tires tomorrow. I'll just go ahead and jacket everything up, and then I should be able to work in here without removing them. So anyways, didn't even really need to remove the tires for this, but I can't really imagine trying to get in there and tightening and loosening these bolts really with the tire sitting right here. So yeah, gonna go and see if I can buy a T50 from the Home Depot tomorrow, and then hopefully that will allow me to get through this nice and quick. So we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, got the T50 part that I needed. Isn't it nice to be on a video where 2 seconds later the part just shows up? But it is the next day and I'm at home, so we're gonna go ahead and jack it up here. The tires are back on, so I'm just gonna jack it up high enough that the suspension is loosened, and then that should be enough to go ahead and fit the fit the Sumo springs in there, and then just lower the suspension back down onto there. So I'll jack it up, put the jack stands underneath, but I don't have to jack it up as high as I did last night. I didn't even really need to do it for the shocks, but it definitely made it easier to do that without having to have the tires in the way as you go ahead and install that. So I'm gonna get some cement blocks and then put the jack on there, jack it up, put the jack stands under there, and then we'll get to it. Okay, now that the jack stands are on there and we're keeping it safe, and I'll show you while it's actually still light here what we're going to be doing under here. So under here you can see we took off the top of the bump stop right here. Here's the lower portion, it's solid metal. There's T50 torque screw bolts that need to come out right from here. We're going to take this off, and then, well, I'm not really showing. These two bolts are going to come out. We're going to take this off, put the Sumo bracket up here. There's actually a T bracket that's going to slide in up at the top, and then there's a bracket that's going to wrap around the axle here down at the bottom, and then they're going to sit in between here, and really that's all that there is to it. Once you get that fully mounted down and this fully mounted down, they just sit there, and then you lower the whole van down, and the van will compress that spring, and then that'll help with the sway. That'll help with the sway while you're driving, and also just kind of support the van. However, our van's not really sitting. Some people will put this on a van that's sitting really low and then use this as the sole means of raising it up. Our van's sitting at a pretty good level just using the leaf springs and stuff, which I think is a better way to raise your van back up. But this will just add a little bit of extra support. So what I'm going to do is get the Sumo springs and start off. I think what we'll do is we'll put these T brackets in here, and then we'll disassemble this piece. I often forget to work smarter, not harder. So just put the attachment on there and get it out of there. That's one. That is off. Now back to the instruction. Okay. So I've got these T brackets here that look like T's. They're going to slide right up inside, right into the spot where the top of the bump stop came out. Fits right in there. And then I've got a spacer and a bracket that's going to go and mount right onto that. And then underneath this bracket is where the top portion of the Sumo spring is going to mount to. So I'm going to get that in there, bolted down, and then we will, I think we'll start on the part that goes on the axle. And I will do my best to film this. This is very awkward under here to try to get the camera around, so we'll see how we do. So I've got this new bracket installed here. So the T goes through there. There's a spacer in between, and then this gets bolted underneath, and then that way it's nice and sturdy under there. It's not going to slide back out. And then that creates a nice strong mounting point for the top of the Sumo spring, which will go between there and the top of this axle. So right around here. So you got the other side here. Usually it's probably not a good idea to do both sides at the same time, because if you're going to make a mistake, you're probably going to make it twice. But I kind of feel like going that approach tonight. So let's hope that this is a one-time effort. So I'm going to take this apart, put this up on the other side, do the same thing, and then we'll come back to this side. So I'm now looking at the bottom portion of these Sumo springs. So here it is. It's got like this bottom portion of the spring here, and I've got these brackets. So I'm just looking at the instructions and just figuring out I gotta screw these onto these brackets ahead of time, it looks like. I'll need my Allen key, and I've got to get these bolts ready because these are what are gonna wrap it around the axle. So there's roughly what it's going to be. This is going to mount over, the axle is going to run right through here. This is going to be on the bottom. There's some nuts here that will put some Loctite on and bolt those on. And then I guess this is going to somehow connect to the existing factory parts that are on there, and it's going to rest on there. So I'm going to go underneath and see how this fits. It does actually seem to sit on there pretty nice. So it's got that one side that kind of sticks out, and that kind of sits between the leaf spring U-bolts that we installed the last time, right in there, and it bolts down underneath here. I've just got them loosely connected just so that they're on here, but it bolts underneath the axle, and then this just sits here right on top. And then I'm gonna have to put the upper part of the Sumo spring on now, And then it looks like, I think it's got a pin that goes through this hole, and then I will have to bolt it to this other side, and then I'll just have to lower the van onto it. So really not too much to it. I'm going to put some Loctite on these bolts. Hard to aim the camera here before I fully tighten them down, and we'll get this top piece on there right now. Okay, so what I've done is I've went ahead and bracketed this bottom portion on there. It's just resting on there. Everything looks good to me. I was having a little bit of a hard time with the upper portion of the SumoSpring because I think I had the wrong bracket on the top. Even though they kind of came pre-assembled and it looked like this diagram fit the driver's side. Oh, I just clued in. So I was looking at the diagram wrong. I should have been working on the passenger side first. Anyways, I think anyway. Now these two pieces are aligning well. So this side is done. I'm going to go do the exact same thing on the other side. And then once that's done, the only difference on the other side is there's going to be a heat shield that comes through the top here. And that way, when the exhaust pipe, since it passes right near there, it's not going to melt the plastic on the SumoSpring. So we'll do the other side, and then we'll set down the van and see how it sits. Okay, switching to the iPhone because my SD card is full now. So I got both the springs on there. I'll show you in a second. It's kind of hard to tell with the alignment, but I think it's because the van is jacked up that they don't look like they sit perfectly on top of each other, but I think as they come down they will mesh together fine. I did mix up the two sides a little bit. I had the passenger side on the driver's side and stuff, so I had to switch things around and kind of redo work. So kind of ate my words there with doing both sides at the same time. I probably would have been better off just doing one. I don't know, but then I might have still found the problem. So anyways, gonna jack it up. I'll show you what they look like under there, then jack them up, get the jack stands out of there, and then we'll see how they come down and sit on top. And hopefully they look like they're sitting properly. Otherwise, I really don't want to take them apart. So you can see them sitting over there. That side's sitting lower than this side, but you can see, so I just don't have that side jacked up as high as this side. But yeah, so they're on there. Everything is bolted down. So now what I'll do is I'll raise this back jack here. That'll allow me to get my jack stands out of there, and then we'll slowly bring it down and see what it looks like as they come down. Try to videotape and lower this at the same time. Just bring it down really slowly. Okay. You can see the right side is sitting inside the SumoSpring. And then the left side is also compressing. Yeah, I think that's as far as it's going down. So, okay, I'll have to get some measuring tape out to see if it's, I wouldn't expect it really to be sitting much higher. But the good thing is it's not really fully resting on the SumoSprings. So I did see it compress a little bit underneath there, but very little. They basically kind of just met in where they connect together. So that looks good. I'd say it looks pretty good. So I'll get a measuring tape and we'll see. I think it was like 7 7/8 is what I said it was last time. Okay, I pulled it out onto the court here. That's sitting pretty good. Both the front and the back seem to be measuring out to be 8 inches. So basically the same as what it was before. I didn't really expect that it was gonna raise it up any further because it was already level, and if it raised it up any further in the back, it would just make the back even quite a bit higher. But it looks good. They seem to be sitting properly under there. I'm gonna take it for a quick test drive around the block to see if I can notice any difference in the drivability. Okay, so I took it for a drive around the block there and everything seems fine. The roads are really smooth, so it's hard to tell kind of what it's like, but taking turns and everything didn't seem like it was doing any kind of leaning. Sometimes with like the weight, you might feel that a little bit. It would kind of lean the opposite direction of your turn. But anyway, so I'd say that's done. So we've finished basically everything on the suspension. I'd say we're at the point where we can actually cross that one off. It's the first one on our list. We do still have a sway bar coming, but I won't really put that in the category of the suspension. Really, the suspension consisted of the shocks, the leaf springs, and the Sumo springs. Those really fixed our back end issues on there. Now that we got the wheel well stuff all cut out and our tires fit in there properly, we'll finally knock off the list the new tires and rims. So anyways, feels good to have the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items done on this list, and then there's still many more. And as we go, we're going to keep adding more onto the back. So just, let us know if there's any suggestions on things that we should be adding to this list. Nicole has been in peak wedding season, so we're not seeing as much of her the last few videos. But then next week, she will be back, and we'll be hitting the road and going on a little bit of an adventure. So join us next week. If you like this video with the van build stuff, hit like, subscribe, and make a comment down below, and we'll see you in the next video. Have a good week, guys.